I identify like a Panamanian Latino.
I'm Venezuelan and I identify myself as a Latina.
Allá en Dominican Republic, soy caribeño.
I was born in Brooklyn. To my family, I'm Puerto Rican, but to the country, I am Latina.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Be Latino, a virtual conversation. I'm Rena Valentin, your host for the next hour. Thank you, WNET, for supporting this conversation, and thank you, HITN, for including me in it. And what is this conversation, you ask? Well, it's an age-old question. What does it mean to be Latino in today's society? Bueno, Latinos, all Latinos, Latinas share profound similarities within their everyday. We are not monolithic. Like a rainbow, we are made of different layers and textures. And well, the outside world tends to flatten and homogenize us. And this show is our attempt to help bring an understanding of what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like within the Latino community. With us today, we'll have a panel of distinguished individuals who will speak from their own personal life experience. And you, the audience, play a large role in this discussion with your questions, so we are encouraging you to join in and ask questions throughout the show. All right, let's get started. Before we dive in with the esteemed panelists, first to set up a historical context to our diversity within the Latino community, we welcome HIT and TV board member, former New York State Assemblyman, who was also the editorial director of El Diario La Prensa, a graduate of Harvard University and Yale Law School. He wrote the best-selling book, War Against All Puerto Ricans, and also wrote and directed the feature film, Vote for Me, which premiered in the Tribeca Film Festival. Everyone, please welcome Nelson Dennis. Hello, Nelson.
A real pleasure. Thanks for including me in this. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. So to start us off, since this show is about diversity, as we know, the terms Latino and or Hispanic are often used interchangeably to describe a group that makes up about 19% of the U.S. population. Nelson, we would love if you can help provide some clarity to both terms, Latino versus Hispanic.
Well, the word is originally the U.S. Census until around 1970 designated Hispanics, Latinos, as white. We did not have a categorical inclusion. There was a lot of lobbying to have our own unique identifier, and that's how the word Hispanic was born, came into existence in relation to describing our community, formally and basically normatively within our own group. As time went, Hispanic relates to, first of all, Spain being the original colonizing, and that's an operative word, colonizing country, which in the seeds of that was its own, in a sense, its own idiosyncratic demise, because there eventually was a controversy arise as to the usage of the word Hispanic, because Spain was, in effect, a conquering and colonizing agent of the Latino world. So in the midst of that, the word Latino was born, came to the fore. It was deemed a bit more, potentially more inclusive and more specific to the experience of Latin America. So there's still a dynamic tension between Hispanic and Latino. Chronologically, Hispanic was the word. Interestingly, to add to the confusion a bit, you might remember that all the government forms in New York City used to designate white, black, and Puerto Rican. So at that time, the word Puerto Rican was designated as the umbrella term for being Hispanic, and that indicated the lack of, again, some sort of normative reference point that would potentially, specifically, and accurately include everyone.
So
We've gone
really,
on to
right? No,
other
so
terminology like Latinx, but that's another matter.
no, because that's good that you brought it up because I was going to actually bring that up because we went from Hispanic to Latino to now Latinx. And really, we're here to educate our audience a little bit more about how all of these names even evolved.
Yeah. Well, Latinx is because in an attempt to be gender binary and to be inclusive in that direction, I must admit to a personal thought process in this. I think that it's actually a step backward because I think that it ends up being reductive. And the more we get away from, to use the word Latinx and to have that be sort of a competing rivalry between one and the other. I personally, and I don't mean to be macho or overly traditional, stereotypical. I think that Latino is at this point the traditional, known, and authoritative designation for us. And I think that Latinx ends up being reductive and possibly divisive. But I take that as a personal
Okay,
opinion.
but some may even argue that Latino is patriarchal.
I understand, and I admitted that. But in our effort to be so specifically and surgically precise, we end up possibly giving an opportunity to the outside world to then disseminate and propagate and exacerbate that confusion. So where we go Latino, Hispanic, Latinx, and it then becomes basically a rhetorical conundrum that we get caught up in. I acknowledge that point. I myself think that we stand more to lose than to gain. But again, as I said, that's a personal opinion in my preference for the term Latino.
Yeah, well, the one term I didn't hear you use was Latina.
Well, Latina is implicit. But then in every novel that we have, we could say he or she said, and so at some point, I'd be perfectly comfortable if we moved in that direction. But Latinx, I don't know. It's almost it takes us on the pathway of being a little. It's a little inhuman. Latin X. I don't like that word X as an ultimate descriptor of our community.
Understood. And so, in closing, what would you like our audience to leave with?
Well, there's an important point: is that, as you said, we're not a monolith. All Hispanics, Latinos, we came here from different countries at different times for different reasons. The Cuban experience has had everything to do with the revolution with Castro, and they got SBO loans, and they have a admittedly and fortunately comfortable relationship with the Republican Party. There was a vested interest in having them be an all-American success story. Puerto Ricans came implicitly as citizens, and they've had a different pathway of inclusion into this country. Colombians have a disproportionate amount of college-educated and engineering background individuals that come to this country. Dominicans have come with a degree of urgency in order to make themselves a fabric of American life and establish their legitimacy, and so that dictates, or at least properly informs the pace, the acceleration of their movement into the United States, and that becomes sociological, psychological. There's a lot of texture. We're not as monolithic. The black community is perceived by the United States as one black fist. They're aware of it. There's just a consensus, and you're dealing with one community. You're not an Ethiopian black, a Congolese black. There is a black community, but the Latino community has all these subtleties. I would like to leave with one key element. The one thing that, and there's also, there's an intergenerational issue, because the first generation very often has a language element. They speak Spanish, but they're not as comfortable with it, and so they don't have the same relationship to America, to American media, to American technology, to access to employment. The second generation is much more fluid and tends to be much more eclectic. The third generation of Hispanics very often is losing the relationship to the original language and is more comfortable with English. So it's sort of an interesting, a cycle.
Right.
So the last message that I would leave, Rena, is that the one element, I think the one common denominator that we have in all of this is our language. And I would urge the audience and parents and families to know that is such a key family dynamic, to not lose our relationship to our language, to preserve our Spanish.
Thank you so much, Nelson. You know, I always wish we had 45 minutes for you. You're like a walking encyclopedia. Nelson Dennis, everyone, thank you so much for making the time. We'll be right back.
I'm Venezuelan and I identify as a Latino.
And I identify as Nuyorican. Anyway, you guys, it's now time to meet our panelists, who I am very excited to introduce. Each will be discussing their experience in their respective fields, carrying their cultural identity, and collectively, they'll give us a sharp portrait, a deeper understanding of the complex and constantly evolving spectrum that is our Latino community. Let's meet them. We have a 6-time Emmy winner from Monica Makes It Happen on Pix 11, Monica Morales. We have the award-winning author of Bad Hair Does Not Exist, Pelo Malo No Existe, proud Garifuna Afro-Latina, Zulma Arzu Brown. And we also have HIT and Executive Director of Government Affairs, former Assemblywoman Naomi Rivera. Welcome, 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 ladies. Thank you for being here. We are going to kick it off. Woo! Yeah, look at these beautiful faces. All right, so we're going to kick it off with Monica, right? Monica, being of Bolivian, Norwegian descent, right? You shared some stories with me, and so I just want to share with our viewers. I imagine being raised mixed has impacted your life both professionally and personally. And so since we all have stories from our childhood where we can remember certain family dynamics that may have helped us see things a bit differently than commonly perceived, well, based on the story that you shared with me about your parents, I would like to share with our audience how that has, what that may have been in your case, right? And how that's shaped decisions that you've made in your life.
First of all, I love this conversation, and I have to applaud you, Rena, for leading this. It's so important that everybody talks about their story. And I didn't know my story was so important because I was always busy telling everybody else's story. And I think now that I've finally gotten to a point in my career where I really am starting to get to know myself and my own history. And I lost my mother 6 years ago to cancer. And I wish I would have asked her more questions. I wish I would have asked her more about when she was undocumented here in this country, how she got here. So there's still a lot of questions that I don't know, but I do know the type of woman that she was and how she made me very strong, and how the perspective, her perspective and my father's perspective, both immigrants to this country, impact my stories every single day when I'm covering, especially the Hispanic Latino community here in New York City. We attract what we are,
right?
And we tell stories differently. We just do as Latinas.
Yeah.
And are we more passionate? I don't know. Are we smarter? Are we better? Maybe,
well, you know, Monica, it was so important for us to have you on to talk about yourself because, like you said, we're so used to you covering other stories, and you are an activist in your own right through your storytelling. And you did share this story about the dynamic between your mom and your dad that I really want to share with our audience today because I found it to be very profound.
Thank you. Well, they met in Chicago. And my mother was undocumented, and she was undocumented for many years. And I grew up in Chicago and Miami. We grew up in both cities, so big cities. And there was a lot of shame attached to being undocumented. And she didn't have a high school education, so education was very paramount for her. And my dad had a PhD, LLM. He was Norwegian, and they had very different, the world treated them very differently. And I saw that growing up. And I always thought that was quite unfair. I said, why is it that my mom is treated so differently than my dad? And it was just very elementary like that growing up. So as I approach stories, I think about how my mom and dad see the stories. My dad, very intellectual, very intelligent, very educated. And my mother would always connect with emotions and people and community. And she was very philanthropic, but she didn't have a high school education. She couldn't speak English. She didn't know how to write. So growing up, I had very different perspectives. And I bring that to every story that I do. And as a product of both of them, that I bring a unique perspective to the audience now. And now, is that a positive? Yes, I see it as an incredible positive, having me in the newsroom and pitching stories that would normally not be told on other network television stations. I think that it does, as Latinas, as our own perspectives, we bring ourselves to our communities. And I see stories that maybe somebody else wouldn't see. And I think they're newsworthy. I think they should be on television every night. So I challenge everyone watching this to think about that. Like, what does your newsroom look like? What does your staff look like? If they don't look a lot like us, or you don't have someone that looks like us, Latinas, you should think about it, because we bring such a unique perspective and stories that I think need to be told. And I always smile a little bit because I see other news trucks that pull up in communities that I'm covering a story, and they're never doing the stories I'm doing.
Right.
They're doing stories that would tend to be a little bit more negative. And I like to do stories that bring out the best in our communities,
Yes.
the best community champions, and they're mostly Latinas that are doing it.
Right. Yeah, and that's definitely really, it's visible that you definitely bring out the humanity in your stories. And the fact that you're speaking to the viewers right now, I'm really curious to know if there's any questions in the chat box. I would love to hear if anyone has anything they'd like to ask Monica.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love a question.
Well, at this present moment, we don't have questions, but there's going to be more opportunities throughout today's session.
Well,
so think
Rena,
about it, everyone. Yes, Monica.
The biggest question I usually get, just between you and me, is how do I get my stories? And you know what? It's funny. They come to us. A lot of people reach out to us on social media and Facebook and Twitter. It's no longer a phone call the news desk. It's usually social media. So if people want to reach out to us, they always can at Monica Morales TV on all the platforms, and Pix11, of course, .com. And our Facebook page is always, we have a Facebook show every Thursday. So that's how we really engage with our audience, through social media now. And I tell you, every day, like today, I'm doing a story about two Latinas, triplets. They both had triplets at almost the same time, and now they've become incredible friends. And it's this celebration of these families that I'm able to tell and stay with them and follow up.
Well, we have questions for you now. The first question is, how do you distinguish your identity through your work?
Ooh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. And a lot of times, as a journalist, a human being and a journalist, it's all one. It's the same thing, because my questions come from my perspective and who I am. Like yesterday, I did a story about college students getting free advice on career advice and college advice and financial aid. And the person I was talking to, his family was from Bangladesh. So immediately, I talked about my own experience with my mom and her not speaking English and not being able to help me through the college process. And we immediately bonded because of that. And we started talking about that. And I realized my experience is not that unique. And so I immediately connect with stories that I also have that personal experience. And you attract what you are. So I just attract those kind of stories. And I hate to say it, I think I'm not that unique. I think a lot of our
I think you're very unique. I wish you would stop saying that. You're very unique. Come on. I mean, we're a rainbow here. I mean, you and I connected.
I feel like we're the same person. You start to realize the more people you meet, the more we all are the same.
Exactly.
We're all the same.
Exactly.
And especially when you look into people's eyes, you see that they are going exactly, whether it's their moms, their parents struggling, trying to make a city affordable.
Yeah.
That's another big thing, is just right now with inflation, watching families struggle just to put food on the table. That's a big thing that we're seeing. And housing has been my biggest issue, fighting for equal housing and repairs for families living in conditions that are just, I can't believe in New York City where families are living like that. So we fight every day. We fight the good fight.
I know. But you know what? We applaud you for bringing it into the forefront and making sure that these stories are heard and documented. Don't go anywhere, Monica, because those other questions, we're going to ask them later. Next up, we're going to have Zulma Arzu Brown, who's been working as a champion for diversity and inclusion. She is the creator of the nation's first Afro-Latino sitcom titled Dique Latino. She's written 2 award-winning books and currently serves as a mentor for Scholastic new book series Rising Voices, Elevating Latino Voices. Zulma and I go way back. We've known each other for years. And well, you know, I want to start off with what you've been really amplifying the past couple of years. You've been very active in promoting the Crown Act through your work and your identity for that matter. Can you share what the Crown Act is?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me? Everyone can hear me good?
I can hear you fabulously.
Okay, fantastic. So I want to start first off with identity. I believe that none of these opportunities would have came my way had I not understood that I am not an ex, I am not an unknown. I am a Garifuna, Black, Afro-Latina, immigrant woman raised in the South Bronx, right? And I brought all of that when I became a mother, and we continue to hear these stereotypical phrases such as pelo malo, which allowed me to write a book called Pelo Malo No Existe, Bad Hair Does Not Exist, and not change my community, but to transform the way in which they look at who I am. The Afro-Latinos, the Garifuna, we are literally in plain sight, yet still invisible. So my books are a way of making sure that all communities, especially Latino communities, are able to see the Black Latinos within their own community. So Black protagonists are very, very important to me, and making sure that my daughters are always seen as valuable, as front page, as center stage. And when I wrote my second book, My Hair Comes With Me, Shifting the Paradigm of What Success Looks Like, I continue to transform the way in which people, in which others or the general market look at what professional women look like. Professional women come with all various hues, with all different types of hair, from locks like the way I wear them now, to afros, to straight hair, to curly hair, but they also come with their own religious background, right? You'll see the Jewish community, and within my books, you'll see the Muslim communities represented, the LGBTQ community. The only difference between my book and many of the books that you see out there is that my protagonists will always be women of beautiful, rich, Nubian colors, because we did not see that, right? Even today in Latino media, we're still not seeing my mother. We're still not seeing my father on the, at the anchor table. We're still a lot of times behind the scenes because we need to appeal to what the quote unquote general market looks like, and when we have to understand that the general market at this point is the multicultural market. We can no longer even look at it, and all of those experiences that I told you about, stories. Monica said stories come to her. My story landed on the hands of the Crown Act campaign, the people who were running front and center, and they were predominantly my African-American cousins.
I know, but can we share with the audience what the Crown Act is so that they understand, right? And I opened up with that because it's such an important movement that is still in effect, right? Mm-hmm.
Right. And the movement is literally doing away with hair discrimination across the nation. That is what the Crown Act is about. When I wrote my book, Rena, and it's important for me to say this,
yes, absolutely.
I discovered that there was hair discrimination, that an employer was allowed to literally not give you a job because of your braids, because of your afro, because of your locks, and they list all of these styles that literally speak to the Black diasporic, the Afro-descendant community. It's our hair, right? So when Dove discovered this, they were like, no way. So in, I believe it was 2019, California was the first state to do away with the Crown Act. Second state was New York, right? And from there, we now have over 14 states that hair discrimination is literally illegal. And I was the first Afro-Latina woman unite and petition against hair discrimination and make sure that in their states, hair discrimination is 100% illegal. And that's how I get the opportunity to fight against hair discrimination in corporations and schools K through 12.
Well, and I've watched you really just be in the forefront of making this awareness, like shed some serious light on that also being a sub-discrimination to whatever cultural background someone comes with. So do we have any questions before we let Sulma go temporarily? Because, again, I need you ladies to stay on.
Yeah, sure. I actually have a question for Monica. I know that her platform is very, very, very important, right? And, as a Latina, but within the Latina community, there are, I'm a Garifuna, which is an indigenous portion of the Garifuna people that come from Central America. But I'm also, a woman and a Latina, and I'm wondering how you are purposely creating that platform or leaving an opportunity for Latinas that look like me to get those same opportunities you're getting. Because it's a fight within our community. It definitely is. So I'm hoping you're an ally in that.
Well, she is an ally, and I don't know, I'm sure, can you answer that, Monica?
Yes, I love that question.
Wonderful.
And I think, I love that she said she has to fight. That's exactly how I feel. And it's still not fair. It's not fair that we're fighting for airtime. We're fighting for the stories to be told. But, my boss happens to be a Latina. So that helps. It helps to have bosses that look like us, come from countries, backgrounds like us. That, again, that's the biggest thing, is that things are changing. And when we have bosses that start to look like us, actually two of my bosses, I also have a Cuban boss. So when that representation is in the newsroom, then it's a little easier for me to pitch the stories. And I have to say, also working this long, almost 20 years, you start to build a reputation where if I do pitch a story, they know it's going to be a story that will not just get clicks, not just be something, but it will also be good for the community. Also, I'm also proud when I do a story and the community tells me, hey, this is really what happened. And this makes us feel proud. And we want to share it. We want to link to it. We want to do that kind. So it makes me feel good when that happens as well. But it's when she says we have to fight, every day is a struggle.
Every day we all have to fight. We all have to fight. And I got to tell you, ladies, I love that this is becoming interactive, but I do want to introduce our next panelist before we all take the floor. Our next panelist is actually the Director of Special Events for, she was as Director of Special Events for the Bronxboro President's Office. She is our last panelist, Naomi Rivera, excuse me, everyone. And she managed the borough's cultural affairs, developing new events such as the Bronx Food and Art Festival and the Puerto Rican Film Festival. She also produced the borough's annual ethnic pride celebrations, which include Hispanic Heritage Month, Jewish Heritage Month, Asian Lunar New Year, and Black History Month. And, well, Naomi was elected to the New York State Assembly in 2004. And at the time, she was only the second Latina of Puerto Rican descent to be elected to the State Assembly in its 226-year history. And this, to me, is both remarkable and yet slightly puzzling. And on the one hand, Naomi, your unique achievements are impressive and inspiring, but on the other hand, it makes me wonder why it took so long to elect a Puerto Rican woman to the State Assembly. Now, we welcome you, Naomi. Thank you for your patience. My first question for you is that, you were raised in a dynasty of political upbringing with your father, Assemblyman Jose Rivera, and your brother Joel serving as a council member. I always wondered, was it inevitable for you to take this path, and what drove you to pursue a career in government?
Actually, I didn't pursue the career in government. I think I was drafted. Growing up in a family that was committed to public service, I always tell the story that when most kids were in the playgrounds, on the swings, and on the seesaws, I was with my family handing out literature about trying to create parity regarding social issues and awareness. So, why it took so long? we have to be better, right? We have to be better coming together as a community. We have different ideologies, and we've got to learn how to agree to disagree better. We've made some strides since my time in the assembly, but they're incremental. I can say that now at the New York State Assembly, where I was the second, you now have. I was number two. I was a Latina, the second Latina. Carmen Arroyo was the first, and there were six of us. I was the first to hold a leadership position, which to me still is baffling, right? Fast forward, we now have 13 in the state assembly, of which more than half are Latinas. We have six in the Senate, of which I believe four are women. So we're making strides, but they are incremental.
And so,
And coming from my, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No. Because now that you're talking in numbers, right? The latest census count says that we're 3.8 million in the state of New York. Can you shed some light on where the Latino community stands within government?
Well, we're first of all, those numbers, are inaccurate. Following the 2020 census, 22 senators from the Hill called for a recount because they found that close to 5% of Latinos, Blacks, and uh, I believe it was, and others were undercounted. And so you only need to look at birth certificates, compare them to death certificates to see that there is a real wrong in those numbers. So,
Do you think that
there's
comes
so
from
much that
undocumented, from being undocumented?
well, we had lots of issues there because we were, this was during the time of the Trump administration, right? And the fear of that question being posed if they were undocumented, right? Although that was a question, it was a hardship and it created fear. And while we did a better job, it would seem in counting in different pockets, overall, it was worse than what we've done in the past. So in 2010, we undercounted by, I think it was 1.57%, and this past count was 4.99. So we have to do better. But so those realities still exist. I'm sorry, your question. I was still thinking about how um, we're not represented not only in government but across all other sectors, right? So we think about Fortune 500 companies. Um, we make up 1%. The boards of those companies. We think about all of the city and state agencies, the boards and authorities. How do we, where are we represented in those? And the saying still applies. I don't remember who coined the phrase, but Latinos need not apply. Um, and that again is because, why? If we are in fact the fastest growing population, right? If we make up a third of the population, why is that? Who do we hold accountable?
And what do
Right?
you
We
think
have to.
needs to be done to transform that?
Well, I think we need to look at ourselves and we need to look at how we come together. We have different ideologies. How do we come together to better agree to disagree so that we can help advance the community?
Right.
And so, and it comes back to, we go back to, we were talking about identity, right?
Right.
Identity is critical, right? How do I identify? And in that, there's so much disagreement, and it divides us. You were talking. I'd like to add to something that Nelson had talked about, and you talked about, and that is the Latinx community. And there's so much controversy surrounding that, right? Well, Latinx was born from the LGBT community, and so we're not all LGBT community, right? So and it was embraced by progressives who wanted to push non-gender or neutral, gender neutral policies.
Right.
But we're not all gender neutral, and so there's a little division there.
Right. Right.
I say that I am
I get your
a
point.
Puerto Rican, a Puerto Rican woman raised in the Bronx. I come from a generation where my parents were told that they needed to abandon their language and their culture in order to fit in. My parents rejected the notion. They
They
fought
sure
hard for
did.
the rightful place in this society. But I was reminded always that I was, never just American. I was, what was I? And so very proudly, like Mariposa, our mutual friend says, yo no nací en Puerto Rico nació en mí.
Yes,
And
that's a
for anyone
beautiful.
that is
No, it's all good because we have questions coming in, and
bilingually
I
challenged,
just love that as a conclusion, right? And in translation, what that means is that I wasn't born in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico was born in me. So we're gonna do the question. I just wanted to translate that to our viewers in case they didn't understand it. Okay, I'm ready for that question. All right, so the question is, what motivates you to continue being a voice representing your cultural values? How do you choose what to bring into the forefront? Would you like to answer that, Naomi?
Can you repeat that again, please?
Sure. What motivates you to continue being a voice representing your cultural values? How do you choose what to bring into the forefront?
Into my workplace? Sorry, this is so bad. Well, listen, how do I choose to, I'm catching some of what you're saying. I apologize. I'm getting bits and pieces. But,
Do you need me to
it's
repeat
the
it again? It's a
disparities that we,
long-winded question. It's a long-winded question. So
you keep breaking up. The question, I understand it. How do I choose to bring issues to the forefront, right?
no. Let me do it again. What motivates you to continue being a voice representing your cultural values? How do you choose what to bring into the forefront?
Well, I mean, what motivates me is ethnic pride, is knowing that we still have so many needs in our community, and when we are grouped um, as one, when we're looked at, and we're not looked at individually, society neglects those needs because we have different needs for each community. And so what motivates me is the disparities. There's so many COVID exposed that still today, when it comes to education, healthcare, the environment, I mean, we are just grossly underserved. And those realities in my communities, I'm now a grandmother. It impacts very directly my children, my family,
Thank you for
and
sharing your
generations
views.
to come.
Well, yes, we're talking generational disparities as well. So I'm going to repeat the question so that both Monica and Sunma have the opportunity to answer. The question again is, what motivates you to continue being a voice representing your cultural values? How do you choose what to bring into the forefront? Would you like to start, Sunma?
I think what motivates me is possibilities, right? My ancestors were originally from the island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the goal for my ancestors was cultural genocide, in which less than 2,500 survived. And then the next place was like Central America, and we ended up in one of the poorest and probably most dangerous places in Central America to live, which is Honduras. And then I came to the South Bronx, which is considered a very marginalized community, Hunts Point area. But what I realized about all of that is through it all, our ancestors managed to keep our culture and our language still intact. The Garifuna community has not ever been enslaved. We came to the Bronx and we held hands and clung to our Puerto Rican brothers and sisters, Dominicano brothers and sisters, and all the beautiful cultures that are within the Bronx. And together we rose above the flames that were set to destroy us. So that power is the possibility of what could be. We can go to school. We can learn our language. We can have our own business. We can build communities before gentrification comes. We have to pass that on to the next generation. And because our ancestors generation is because I've seen some things. I have to share it.
Right.
And because I share it, I know that it's in great hands. Our community is in wonderful hands. The next generation is in great hands and great standing. So long as we continue to mentor them, be by their side, and show them that it's possible. I am a possibility that has become a reality.
Well, that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here, Sulma. Thank you for that. We are creating possibility, and I really appreciate you also identifying yourself as a Garifuna woman, because that's the idea, is that there's different subcultures within our cultures and different folkloric backgrounds. So it's like we all understand our differences, but yet we're able to come together and embrace each other's similarities within those differences. So, Monica, this is to you. Same question. What motivates you to continue being a voice, representing your cultural values? How do you choose what to bring into the forefront?
And what a great question, Rena. And I have to say the people. The answer is the people. They're the best stories, and they're leading the way. Mostly Latino and Latinas are leading the way in their communities, and I tend to be attracted to community-based stories, specifically people making a difference, community champions, filling in gaps where, let's say, the city, state, and federal agencies can't fill. So guess who's right at the forefront? Guess who's right on the front row is our community. So that's what continues to drive me. I'm always after the story as a journalist. I can't help it. So they're the best stories. So if you look at my Instagram or Facebook, 9 out of 10 of my stories are with a Latino or Latina as the focus, because they're the best stories and they're doing things.
Yeah.
It's not about talking about it, but they're actually making positive change happen in their communities.
Yeah, it's a different mindset and it's a different perspective, right? Because there's a certain level of understanding. We have another question, ladies. The next question is, what do you feel is underrepresented? And they use the term Latinx, so I'm going to read it exactly the way they presented it. What do you feel is underrepresented from the Latinx voice? Okay, so you know what? I'm sorry, I couldn't see you for a minute, ladies, but I'm just going to start with Sulma this time.
Yeah, what do I think is missing from the Latinx terminology?
No, voice,
right?
voice.
You know what? I completely understand what Latinx means, and it's very important to be inclusive of brothers and sisters in the LGBTQ community. But I think that representation is missing for me. I identify as an Afro-Latino woman, and the moment, and this is across so many Afro-Latinos, right? A lot of us in this space feel this way. When the Latinx term came, our fight for diversity and our agenda got pushed to the bottom. Wherein what happens to all of our esfuerzo during all of these years? And it seems to me that we have colorism that we were addressing in our community, which is still very, 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 very prominent.
Yes, it is.
It got pushed to the bottom, to the point that it's delaying our progress from seeing Afro-Latinos with darker hues still. So what's missing from the Latinx terminology, I'm going to switch the question around, is the different cultures. For example, the Afro/Black Latinos are missing from that equation, to the point that many of us do not want to be in that category.
I understand. I get it. And you know what? You're entitled. It's a generational term. And we're really short on time, ladies. And I would like to hear a response from both Monica and Naomi. But if we could just make it succinct, we're going to run out of time. And I want to hear from both of you.
So I agree. That it is representation, and we need clarity. The Latinx community, who are you and what are your needs? Because when we're grouped, we lose out on that. We don't see what the needs are, and so that is what's missing in terms of a voice representation. Somebody that could very specifically address the Latinx community needs.
Got it. Monica.
You know, I come from the place of like it's such a focus for me that I feel like we're making such strides every day in the news business that I feel like it's changed so much these past few years that I think we're doing very well. We could always do better, but I think it's one story at a time, one newscast at a time, one hire at a time. I think if there are any bosses watching, if they can just have that sensitivity that there needs to be better representation, not just, in the newsroom, but also in our coverage, making sure that when we follow stories, we're following Hispanic and Latino stories just as hard as any other stories. And I think having people that have backgrounds that have that sensitivity, and my Spanish is terrible. I'm going to just put it out there. If you speak the language, it helps so much. And my mom, I know in heaven, is saying, please, Monica, practice your Spanish, practico español, por favor. And I get it. And just the fact that I try and I have a practical application of it is so important going into communities. But it's just keep fighting the good fight, keep pushing the stories, keep pushing for coverage, keep trying to get the job, get a seat at the table. Like when they close the door, you just kind of put your foot there and you're like, wait a second, let me in.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, what we're talking about is having cultural representation in different fields. So thank you all for sharing your views. Once again, we have Monica, Sulma, Naomi. We also had Nelson earlier. Thank you so much for sharing your points of view. I'm sure they are well noted. And thank you, WNET, for your participation and for choosing to learn about this key part of America's diversity to build our future together. According to the census, by the year 2050, Hispanics will be 30% of America's population and growing. I mean, what truly makes America stand out from the rest of the world is our diversity. So let's continue to have these conversations so we can embrace finding similarities within our differences. And well, as a proud Afro-Boricua Latina, it has been my privilege to share space in today's Being Latino discussions. May it be the first of many. Here's to leaving things better than we found them, my favorite saying. And I'm Rina Valentin, and on behalf of all of us here at HITN TV, may the universe provide paz, prosperity, y amor. We'll see you again soon. Have a great day, everyone.